I'll be leaving and taking half of the staff with me. In front of me, envelopes were scattered about, each one labeled resignation letter. Half of them implied direct rejection. Must have discarded 30 resignation letters. There is a significant problem with about half of the staff quitting this organization. It appears that you have finally been held accountable for your deceit. It turns out that your father was as awful a CEO as I had assumed, and you disregarded my advice. In any case, we're leaving this organization. I was shocked by the blatant brutality of what he said. Perhaps his death was the only punishment he deserved. In any case, we're leaving this organization. Shocked by the blatant brutality of what he said, it appears that Direct didn't hear my concerns. Even though I believed I had been paying attention to them, I looked away. Now unconcerned about him and the others, I casually replied, "Go right ahead." What did he truly believe? That I would try to stop him? I heard Dirk's astonished voice. Before long, they will regret leaving my company. Kirk is my name. I recently assumed the position as head of the General Affairs Department at a food processing company. I recently turned 40. My father, Sam, the CEO, told me it was time for me to assume a leadership position, whether or not it constituted nepotism. Even though this year is his 60th birthday, he appears older than his actual age. He seems worn out these days, maybe as a result of bearing the burden of responsibility for so long. I was completely taken aback when he abruptly gave me the department head position. I had no idea how to manage a team because, up until then, I had been an ordinary employee, but I gave it my all since I knew my father trusted me to do the job. We frequently have discussions like this. It wouldn't be fair to appoint you CEO right immediately, so let's start with department head. I intend to turn the company over to you eventually. I'm confident you can manage it. Thank you for the trust, Dad, but I already have a lot of department head duties. I doubt that I could manage the role of CEO. You'll be all right. There are many trustworthy allies on your side. My father started making mistakes at work because he was tired, which damaged the company's reputation and eventually caused business to drop. Foster Foods was the one that offered assistance at that trying time. They kept doing business with us at a discount, and their CEO did my father a favor. I've heard that the agreement between our businesses went something like this. Your father assisted us many years ago when my company was about to fail. I'm simply returning the favor. I sincerely appreciate it. You've really come to our rescue. Foster Foods helped keep my father's business from going bankrupt. I was incredibly appreciative of Foster Foods' assistance because so many other partners had stopped doing business with us. Furthermore, through a special relationship, I got married to Molly, the daughter of the CEO of Foster Foods. She has helped me both professionally and personally ever since. Her assistance was crucial during my hectic workdays as department head, especially since I had a tendency to overlook my personal life. Molly and I got along well, and my days felt full and fulfilling, even if our marriage was founded on mutual benefit. I asked her one day, with a hint of concern, "We ended up in a marriage without love. Are you truly comfortable with that?" She gave a soft smile after appearing a little taken aback. "There is absolutely no issue. This marriage was a blessing for me because I had been dealing with a stalker. In addition, I like spending time with you." I felt a great sense of relief to know that she truly cared about me. That day signaled the coming of new employees at our organization in the spring of the following year. As their boss, it was my responsibility to properly mentor the new hires joining our department. They probably still had a lot to learn since most of them were inexperienced and had recently graduated from school. It was my job to make sure they could show off their skills to the fullest and stay out of trouble. "All right, I'm leaving. Good luck and be careful. Oh, and could you email me on my work phone if I get a call at home regarding the restaurant? They might not be aware of the temporary number because I sent my own phone in for repairs." Got it? The message I cited was about a personal situation that I typically manage on my own phone, not work-related. I assumed they would probably call the home phone instead, as it was out for repair. I was a little concerned that Molly could accidentally forget my personal number and call it out of habit. Early to prepare as department head, by around 8 a.m., the new hires started to arrive. We had already met during the orientation, but I still felt a little nervous. Our company's future rests on your shoulders, so let's work together from today on. Yes, absolutely. The new employees responded enthusiastically, showing great energy. Among them, one person stood out to me. I gave Molly one last word and left to get ready for my role as department leader. I got to work early, and by 8 o'clock, the new employees began to show up, even though we had already met at the orientation. I was still a little anxious. Happy morning. The future of our business depends on you, so let's collaborate starting today. Yes, absolutely. The new hires gave enthusiastic, high-energy responses. One of them caught my attention. With me here, I'll make this company number one. I'm ready to give my all and contribute, so let's get to it. The confident new hire's name was Dirk. He was a man in his 20s and the only son in a prestigious family of high achievers. He performed exceptionally well in the company entrance exam, so there were high expectations for him. However, there was also some concern. Confidence in oneself is generally a good thing, but Dirk tended to be somewhat arrogant compared to others. He'd often looked down on people and sometimes imposed his opinions during group work. During the interview process, his tendency for dominance had been quite evident. Despite this, he was hired based on his strong potential, according to the interview panel. I worried, though, that he might clash with others, and it didn't take long to happen. When assigned to organize some data, Dirk promptly remarked, "This is such an outdated method. I'll come up with an efficient way to do this that'll help us get through the work faster." Naturally, his comment irritated the experienced employee guiding him. I stepped in to smooth things over, but the prospect of this happening repeatedly left me with a heavy feeling. I resolved to keep a close watch on him to ensure he didn't stray down the wrong path. About 30 new employees joined the company this year. With our recent growth, our workforce had nearly doubled. 5 of the new hires were assigned to my department, and they all had somewhat strong personalities. They were bright and outspoken, but Dirk tended to be overly confident and impulsive, while the other 4 had a tendency to stubbornly cling to their ideas. Once they decided something was right, they stuck with it. I had to be careful when teaching them the ropes. After all, if they picked up the wrong habits, it would be tough to correct them later. Some employees are simply more challenging to train. Though I've only been in this role for a year, I can't help but respect the other department heads who deal with this every day. This method is actually better in this case. It may seem cumbersome at first, but it's reliable. Really, to me, it feels like a waste of time. I think my way would be more efficient. I feel like Dirk, and I have this kind of conversation constantly. Dirk, with his sharp mind, always comes up with methods that cater to highly skilled workers, but not everyone operates that way. The standard methods exist for a reason. However, no matter how much I explained, Dirk seemed unwilling to listen, and his gaze grew colder with each passing day. The constant strain from this situation wore on me mentally. Even if I wasn't physically exhausted, it became apparent enough that even Molly noticed my fatigue. "It seems like you've had a rough day." Molly greeted me at the door, offering a sympathetic smile as she noticed the exhaustion on my face. Before we got married, Molly had worked as the daughter of a company president. Now she took care of everything at home as a full-time homemaker. After enjoying the meal she had prepared, I shared with her the events of the day. Molly, who had been listening quietly, suddenly remarked, "Come to think of it," as she recalled something from the past. When I was working, there was a manager who stopped me. He had the same last name. He had a son named Dirk, if I remember correctly. Really, I was surprised to hear her mention someone with the same name as Dirk, the new hire in my department. Looking uneasy, Molly rubbed her arm and continued, "He was relentless. I even lied about having someone I liked, but he kept asking me out. Some might say he was determined, but in reality, he was just stubborn. I wonder if Dirk is the same way. It's hard to say if they're the same person, but Dirk sure is stubborn. He rarely budges on his opinions, and it's exhausting dealing with him every day." Not knowing how to handle Dirk's challenging personality, I felt overwhelmed. Perhaps noticing my frustration, Molly gently changed the subject. "By the way, how's the restaurant you're helping out at on your days off?" She was referring to the place I'd been assisting temporarily. "It seems things are finally getting back on track. They should be hiring new staff within a few days." "That's a relief. I have been helping out at a friend's restaurant on my days off. Several of their employees had come down with a bad flu, leaving them severely understaffed. Though busy with my own job, I stepped in because my friend was in a real bind. Kindness always finds its way back to you. One day someone will surely help your company in return," Molly said with a warm smile as she cleared the dishes. Her words about kindness reminded me of Foster Foods, the company that had once helped my father's business. A bit of empathy can go a long way in saving someone during difficult times. Thinking about this, I felt the stress from my day gradually start to lift. Incidentally, a few days later, I learned from Dirk that his father worked at Foster Foods. Apparently, his father was in the same department. Molly had mentioned confirming that her story about the stalker was indeed true. Dirk seemed unaware of this part of his father's past, though after talking to Molly, I decided to keep a closer eye on his behavior. He often opposed my methods, but he seemed to get along with the other employees. However, he frequently criticized me to the new hires. "Kirk's methods are such a hassle. Can you believe we're stuck with him as our manager? My way would obviously work better than these outdated techniques." "Yeah, you're totally right, Dirk. I can't believe Kirk won't acknowledge Dirk's methods. He's just narrow-minded." Dirk had been rallying the new employees, pointing out what he considered to be my flaws. He even complained to my father, the CEO. "The head of our department is awful. You've got to hear this. You seem to have a lot to say about my son lately. More complaints, I take it." "Yes, he never listens to my ideas." Because of that, I ended up causing trouble for my father when he called out of concern. I was filled with a deep sense of guilt. Dirk's problematic behavior would likely need to be addressed as soon as possible. At the time, I was prepared to let things go if Dirk was willing to apologize. Everyone makes mistakes, and I didn't want to be the kind of manager who dismisses someone without giving them a chance to improve. But then, a few months after the new hires joined, an incident occurred. It was during lunch break. Unexpectedly, Molly visited the office, braving the summer heat. She had come to check on me, knowing I'd been extremely busy lately. "Here, I brought you some ice cream. I remember you like mint chocolate chip, right? I got 10, so please share them with the team." "Thank you, this really helps. But are you sure you're okay?" "I had something to eat at the K, so I'm fine. Still, it must have been tiring. You should cool off here in the office a bit before heading back." The distance from home to the office wasn't exactly close, and without a car, Molly likely took public transportation. Looking closer, I noticed she was sweating. I guided her to an empty conference room, intending to put the ice cream in the freezer. Just as I was about to leave, Molly's phone rang. "Oh, it's from your family. I wonder why they're calling my phone," Molly said, puzzled. She answered the call, and not wanting to interrupt, I quietly stepped out of the room. About 30 new employees came shuffling in, and leading the group at the front was Dirk. Out of nowhere, he hurled an accusation at me. "Kirk, we can't work here any longer." The shock of his words left me speechless. I hadn't even had time to pick up the box of ice cream I dropped as Dirk continued his tirade. It seemed he had seen me helping out at the restaurant and completely misinterpreted the situation. "The company's financial state isn't good, is it? I saw you working another job recently. Things must be so bad that you're forced to take on extra work." I hurried to clear up his misunderstanding, but Dirk quickly talked over me as if determined to silence me. His actions made it clear he wasn't interested in any explanation. He just wanted to drag me down. Looking at me with a smug expression, he raised his voice even more. "On top of that, I heard you're in a loveless marriage and have been forcing other companies into deals to keep us afloat. My father told me everything. If that's what it takes to keep this company running, then there's no future here." Dirk's father was a manager at Foster Foods, so it was possible he had access to certain details about our company. I didn't know the exact power dynamics within that company, but given his past of stalking Molly, he might have done some digging himself. It wasn't surprising that Dirk's father seemed well informed about things on our side. The other new hires nodded along in agreement, following Dirk's lead as he condemned me. At that moment, another issue surfaced. Molly emerged from the conference room, her face pale. She walked up to me and whispered, "Your father collapsed. He was taken to the hospital, but he didn't make it." "What?" My heart sank. "What happened?" "Your mother thought you wouldn't be able to stay calm if she told you herself, so she called me instead." The sudden news hit me hard, and I sank to my knees as my vision went dark. The only thing keeping me grounded was the feeling of Molly's hand, gently comforting me. "Your father's last words were that he wanted you to take over the company," Molly continued softly. "According to your mother, he'd been suffering from overwork for a while. He collapsed while handling work outside the office." Even Dirk and his followers went silent in the face of this news, but Dirk wasn't done yet. He turned to the other employees and addressed them. "I feel for him, but we need to think about our own futures. If someone like him becomes CEO, then this company has no future. Don't you all agree?" "Yeah, Derek's right. We can't make a living if we stay here," encouraged some of the uncertain employees. Dirk turned back to me, his voice resolute as he threw something down in my direction. "We're leaving and taking half the staff with us." A flurry of envelopes scattered in front of me. Each was marked resignation letter. Half, meaning Dirk had thrown down 30 resignation letters. Losing almost half of the company's workforce would be a severe blow. "It seems like karma has finally caught up with you for deceiving us. You ignored my advice, and your father was no better. Maybe his passing was simply the punishment he deserved. We're leaving this company, and there's nothing you can do about it." I tried to face Dirk seriously, but clearly none of it had reached him. No longer caring to respond sincerely, I gave a dismissive answer and turned my back on them. "Go right ahead." Did Dirk actually expect me to try to stop him? His baffled expression was almost comical. "Don't pretend you're not worried. I know you're panicking on the inside." Looking skeptical, Dirk said this before leading the 30 employees out of the building. It appeared he hadn't been bluffing. When I checked the resignation letters he'd thrown down, I saw that each one was properly signed. But they would regret this decision soon enough. No, I'd make sure of it. I would work hard as CEO, prove myself, and show everyone, including those who left, what they missed out on. With renewed determination, I reached for the box of ice cream that had been left behind. The time spent had caused it to melt, and sticky liquid was already seeping through the cracks in the box. Several months later, since Dirk and the others had left, I had been working alongside new employees. There were moments when I worried about the company's future, but things were going well. Our work was steady, and our client list was growing. Molly constantly reminded me not to overwork myself like my father had, so I reached out to various people for help. I even asked former employees to return and brought in help from a friend who owned a restaurant. I relied on every connection I had. Thanks to those efforts, the company entrusted to me by my father continued to thrive. With a major business deal underway, the company's future was looking secure. One day, the former new hires returned to the office, looking visibly uncomfortable. They bowed their heads in apology, one after another. "We're sorry. Is there any chance we could take back our resignations?" The company we were supposed to join suddenly told us they didn't know who we were. It was Foster Foods. Most of those who had resigned had planned to join Foster Foods, something they casually mentioned when leaving the company. But since Foster Foods had a close relationship with me, they hadn't accepted those who chose to abandon my company. Dirk should have been aware of this, but he likely kept it to himself, prioritizing his desire to harm my reputation over being honest with the others. Those who left, thinking Foster Foods was waiting for them, had been played by Dirk's manipulations. "We're truly sorry. Could you possibly take us back?" Among those apologizing, one person stood out, looking particularly uneasy. It was Dirk, but unlike the others, his expression wasn't one of apology. He was glaring at me with unmistakable resentment. Dirk was clearly hostile. "Your performance in our interview was poor, Dirk, but I understood that as new graduates, you'd have your weaknesses. I hired you despite them. Other companies simply weren't as forgiving." "No, that can't be." Dirk's face twisted in disbelief, and he muttered, "This has to be a lie," before storming toward me. "Hey, you must have done something. This is all your fault, isn't it?" I quietly stepped aside to avoid him and turned my attention to the others who continued to apologize. "Are you all serious about making a fresh start here?" "Yes," they responded. "We've come back to make up for our mistakes. After seeing how other companies operate, we realized this was the best place for us." People make mistakes. I didn't hold it against them for getting the wrong idea. That's human nature. But spreading unverified information is a fact that was unacceptable. "Do you understand what went wrong?" "Yes, we now know you were only helping out a friend's restaurant. We've looked into everything Dirk told us. Since then, we can't believe how foolish we were at the time." If they truly intended to reflect and start over, I wasn't about to deny them a second chance. I addressed the apologetic new hires. "I'll conduct another interview, so come to the office at the time I'll be providing shortly." Relief washed over their faces as they thanked me, visibly grateful. But as for Dirk, I had nothing to offer him. It wasn't just that he left the company. It was the way he insulted my father. Finally, I turned my gaze toward him. "Dirk, during your time here, you often spoke disparagingly of me as your manager, and your insults toward my father cannot be overlooked. I won't tolerate anyone who disturbs the workplace atmosphere and manipulates their peers." Dirk shot me a fierce glare, then turned his back. "I'd never work under you again. Anyway, mark my words, I'll get my revenge." With that, he walked out. I didn't know what he might be plotting, but for the sake of my company and employees, I resolved to stay vigilant. Despite the lingering worry over Dirk, I threw myself into work. We had several big projects underway, including a major business deal and a new product launch. By the time I got home, it was usually around midnight. But even at that hour, Molly would be up, waiting to greet me. I can't thank her enough for reheating dinner and preparing a warm bath for me. I decided to ask her something that had been on my mind for a while. "Molly, I know our marriage was initially out of convenience for both of us, but how do you feel about it now?" "Why do you ask all of a sudden?" Molly was chuckling softly, but she must have realized I was serious. She responded with a serious expression on her face. "I do love you, you know, even if the initial reason was more practical, like dealing with my stalker." I felt the same way. Hearing her honest answer, I felt a wave of relief. Looking at her warm smile, my heart eased. I realized I'd felt this way soon after our marriage. If I'd shared my feelings back then, I wouldn't have had to carry around this uncertainty. Now that we know we're on the same page, how about we take a trip somewhere together? "Sure. Where should we go?" "Why don't you choose? I'm not very good at this sort of thing. Having something to look forward to would motivate me even more with work. There's a new hot springs resort that just opened last month. I've been wanting to go. A hot spring sounds great. I'll make sure to clear my schedule. Molly beamed with excitement. And there's a popular restaurant nearby that's tough to book. Let's try it while we're there. We ended up talking about our trip plans until dawn. 3 years passed since that day. Dirk never returned to my company, but his name started circulating within the industry. It seemed that Dirk had gone ahead and started a new company. His company was rapidly growing and making a strong impact in our industry. Then one day he suddenly approached my company with a business proposal. He wanted to sell us essential seasoning ingredients for processed foods at exorbitant prices. Naturally, the sales team, knowing the history, turned him down. But Dirk was relentless. He continued contacting the sales team under various pretenses, disrupting their work. Apparently, he often argued with our salespeople, saying, "Why won't you agree to a deal? I'm going out of my way to reach out here. Sure, it might be a bit pricey, but this is from a famous company." I heard he even came close to physically intimidating one of our employees. At first, I thought he was just trying to waste our time and hinder our operations, but it seemed I had misjudged his intentions. When I met with him at his office, he confidently explained his reasoning. "My company is about to become #1 in this industry. If you think about it, the smart move is to partner with me now. Isn't that obvious? The food industry is buzzing about my company. Once I'm on top, it will prove I was right all along." It seemed clear that he wasn't just trying to pull us down. He genuinely wanted to assert his superiority over my company. And above all, he still couldn't bring himself to acknowledge his own mistakes. It would have been ideal to secure a deal with such a promising company, but I turned it down. The reason was that the employees at his company looked completely lifeless. Watching them walk down the hallways with pale faces and blank expressions, I realized this company had no future. As it turned out, my intuition was right. Dirk's rapidly growing company hit a major decline at one point. One by one, employees started quitting, and the business couldn't stay afloat. Apparently, Dirk's approach was extremely forceful, and he was making his employees work to the breaking point. Former employees now working elsewhere mentioned that working there felt like being in a black company, a term for toxic workplaces. Nobody could keep up with the endless hours, Dirk demanded, and eventually they all left. Now his company was on the brink of bankruptcy. However, it seemed Dirk couldn't understand why this was happening. He even went to the homes of those who left, trying to persuade them to come back. Despite his efforts, not a single person returned. Then one day I happened to run into Dirk, wandering around. "Lynn, we talk for a bit?" "What, did you just come here to mock me?" "Not at all. Let's sit in that nearby park and talk." We walked over to a park bench and sat down. Since we weren't on friendly terms, I got straight to the point. "You don't understand the value of people because you only see them as pieces on a board for your own use." I told him what I had felt for a long time. Dirk looked at me, surprised. "What did you just say?" "Also, you're too convinced that your way is the only right one. There's wisdom to be learned from others' methods. So you're saying I was foolish." He probably hadn't realized his own flaws until now. I could see the irritation as he ran his hands through his hair. "So you're saying I should just lower myself to accommodate foolish people?" "That's not it. It means you should respect other people's ways and not force your own approach on everyone. Not everyone has the same abilities. So basically, you're saying my failure is my own fault." With a self-deprecating tone, Dirk muttered that he should have paused to reflect before things got to this point. But because he couldn't recognize his own shortcomings, this was the result. Looking downcast, Dirk murmured quietly, "Why did you even bother talking to me?" Derek asked, his voice trembling. "Because you're still young. You can start over. It would be a waste to let this be the end." After a brief moment of thought, Derek wiped his eyes and stood up. I shouldn't be sitting here. I need to get back and turn things around. Seeing a hint of life back in his expression, I simply nodded. I'm glad to hear that. I hoped my words had given him a little encouragement. Afterward, Derek seemed to struggle quite a bit, but he changed his attitude. He hired new employees and managed to avoid bankruptcy. A few months later, he even visited my company with a box of sweets to apologize. Back then, I was wrong to deceive people and quit for my own gain. I'm truly sorry, he said, bowing deeply. At first, the former employees who had joined my company were angry, but over time, most of them forgave him. I think Derek will be fine now. He's learned from his mistakes and should be able to build a company while genuinely caring for his employees. I hoped this marked a new chapter for him, a better one. With things at my company calming down, I decided to go on a long overdue date with Molly. We had lived so long without speaking honestly to each other that there was a lot I wanted to discuss. The day before our date, I finished work early to head home. As I walked out of the office, the employees called out to me, "Good luck on your date with your wife tomorrow. Thank you for all your hard work. Enjoy yourselves." I smiled, feeling a warmth that reminded me of how much these people meant to me. Thank you all for your help, too. Make sure you take breaks when you need them. It's easy to grow arrogant when you're in a position of power, but I resolved to keep myself grounded and always value my employees. They were the backbone of the company, and I wanted them to know that I recognized their efforts. With that thought in mind, I set off, feeling excited for my date with Molly.